I didn't plan to steal. I planned to choose the smallest loaf, the one that looked a little older, like time had softened its pride, and ask if someone could help. But plans are fragile when you're small, and voices are sharp when you're hungry. The bell over the market door rang behind me, a cheerful sound that didn't match the tightness in my chest, and I stepped into a brightness that made every scratch on the floor shine. "Keep your hands where I can see them," the woman at the counter said, not unkind yet, just tired. People talk like that when they think trouble is a shadow that follows children around. I nodded. My fingers were stiff from cold and worry. I held them close to my coat, then reached for the bread. It was warm in a way that surprised me, like a little sun trapped in crust. I thought of my mother cutting slices so thin the light went through them, and that thought wrapped me for a second the way a blanket does when it still remembers your shape. "Money?" the cashier asked. The word felt heavier than the loaf. I had a few coins, not enough, and the last good thing I owned, a small, crumpled photograph. The corners were round from years of being held. On the front, a man in a navy suit stood beside a hospital bed, smiling the kind of smile people use when they're promising to come back. On the back, there were numbers, written in my mother's neat, careful hand. A bracelet number. A date. A hint. I put the coins on the counter. They sounded thin. The cashier's eyes moved from the coins to my face, and the gap between those two places felt like a cliff. "It's not enough," she said gently. "I'm sorry." I swallowed. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, big, slow knocks on a locked door. Slowly, like I didn't want to scare a bird, I placed the photograph on top of the coins. "She's not lying," I said, and I heard the mistake only after the words were out. I'm not lying, she's not." My mother always told stories in the third person when she wanted to be brave. Maybe I was borrowing her courage. The cashier frowned, leaning closer. "What's this?" "My father," I whispered. "He's real. He's looking for me." A laugh broke somewhere behind me. Not cruel yet, amused, like a show had started by accident. The manager came from the aisle in a red dress that moved like a flag. Her heels ticked against the tile, little hammers, and when she stopped, the air around us stopped too. "What's the situation?" she asked. "She doesn't have enough," the cashier said softly. "She says the man in the photo is her father." The manager's eyes slid over me the way rain slides over glass. "She didn't see inside. She never would." "And you thought a picture would cover the difference," she said. "Sweetheart, this isn't a charity." "It's not to pay," I said quickly, feeling my face heat. "It's to prove I'm not lying. He's real." "He." "Children lie," someone muttered. "A man with a basket full of bright apples. They learn it early." Phones appeared as if pulled by a string. Screens rose like small moons. I felt smaller under their light. "I didn't steal," I said. "I wanted to ask. I'm just hungry." The manager lifted the photo with 2 fingers, as if it were sticky. She looked at the front, then flipped it over. The numbers smiled up at her, patient and certain. She didn't read them out loud. She just sighed, a sound that said she had already made up her mind before I walked in. "Security," she called, not loudly, but loudly enough. "We're not doing this today. Put the bread down." The words, "put the bread down," sounded like a sentence a judge would say. I held the loaf a second longer, then set it gently on the counter, like I was saying sorry to a small, warm animal. The plastic crinkled. "Please," I said. "He's my dad. He doesn't know where I am." But he's looking. The bracelet number is from the hospital. My mother wrote it because she said numbers don't forget like people do. The cashier's face softened. For a moment she looked like she might be someone else, an aunt, a neighbor, a person who remembers that a small voice is still a voice. But the manager's red dress was a stop sign between us. "Little girl," the manager said, "if you can't pay, you can't take. And if you make trouble, we call the police. It's very simple." Simple. I wanted to tell her nothing about life was simple when your home fit inside a pocket, when you carried a photograph like a door you hoped would open from the other side. The two guards arrived, gray shirts, careful smiles, and stood a step away, not touching me, but close enough that the space felt crowded. A woman near the magazines lifted her phone higher and whispered, "She says that's her father." Her whisper traveled, getting larger as it moved, until it wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a headline. The manager placed the photo back on the counter, not gently. "We're done," she said. "Leave the store." I reached for the photograph, my hands steadier than my breathing, and held it against my chest. It was warm from other hands. It understood being passed around. I looked at the man in the picture and tried to remember the way his voice sounded in the stories my mother told. She never called them stories. She called them memories that haven't finished happening yet. "He will come," I said, but I said it to the photograph, not to the room. "Out," the manager repeated, and one of the guards gestured toward the sliding doors. They made a sound like a sigh every time someone left, a soft, tired breath, and I suddenly wanted them to stay closed forever. I took a step back, then another. The loaf of bread sat on the counter like a small, ordinary miracle I had almost touched. The cashier looked at me. It was quick, a glance that had sorry in it, and then she looked away because sorry is heavy when your boss is watching. "Please," I tried again, the word thinner now, worn from use. "Don't hurt me." I didn't. "Come on," the guard said, gentle in a way that made it worse. "You can't be here." The doors read the air and decided to open. A gust of colder light spilled across the floor, pulling goosebumps up my arms. And then something happened that made every phone hand freeze, every whisper swallow itself. A tall man stepped into the doorway. Not just tall, deliberate. The kind of tall that doesn't apologize for being seen. A navy suit, a face that carried tiredness like a map, and eyes that searched the room as if he'd been searching rooms for years. He stood there a half-breath longer than anyone expected, as if the world had lagged for him and needed time to catch up. The manager's mouth thinned. "Sir, we're handling." "Excuse me," he said, and the words didn't ask permission. They opened space. His gaze moved from the guard to the counter to the loaf, and then to me. It stopped the way a compass needle stops, sudden, certain, like it had found north. I felt the photograph heat against my fingers. For 1 second, the whole store became a hallway, and at the end of it, he was standing under fluorescent light that made everything look too honest. I lifted the picture so its face could meet his face. Two versions of the same man looked at each other across a river made of years. The phones started again, little gasps in square frames, but their sound was far away now. The man took a step, then another, each one as careful as if he were walking on thin ice towards something he couldn't bear to lose. When he reached me, he didn't kneel like in the movies. He lowered himself slowly, as if the floor might vanish if he moved too fast, and his eyes filled with a light that wasn't from the store. "Where did you get that photograph?" he asked, voice roughened by miles. "My mother kept it," I said. "She wrote the bracelet number on the back." She said, "Numbers don't forget." His jaw trembled, just a fraction. He turned the photo with fingers that were sure and shaking at the same time. He read the back once. Then again. He closed his eyes like a man hearing a name he had been calling into the wind. The manager crossed her arms. "Sir, do you know this child?" He opened his eyes and looked at me, not through me, not past me, at me, as if seeing is a decision you make with the whole of yourself. "I do," he said softly. "I've been looking for her." The store didn't breathe. Even the doors forgot to sigh. And in that quiet, the bread stopped being evidence and went back to being bread. If stories like this move you, if you believe small voices deserve to be heard, stay with me till the end, and afterward tell me in the comments what you felt. It helps more than you think. He didn't touch me right away. He held the photograph between both hands like it could bruise, and something in his face, some tired brightness, made the store look smaller around us, as if walls were inching closer to listen. The guards shifted. The cashier stopped breathing with her mouth and started breathing with her eyes. The manager's bracelets clicked together, impatient thunder in a dry sky. "Sir," the manager said, syllables arranged like barricades, "if you know this child, then you can take responsibility outside. Inside my store, we have rules." He didn't look at her, he looked at the bracelet numbers on the back of the photo. "Rules keep things in order," he said, voice low, almost to himself. "And numbers keep memories from getting lost." "Exactly. So let's follow procedure." She smiled without smiling. "Security office." "No." The gray-shirt guards flicked their chins toward a narrow door near the magazines. I felt the sudden wish to disappear into my coat like a turtle, but the man in the navy suit glanced at me, just once, and the glance said, "You can stand up straight, you don't have to fold." He turned to the cashier. "May we borrow that bread?" he asked, as if borrowing bread were as ordinary as borrowing a pen. The cashier nodded before her boss could stop her. She slipped the loaf into a paper bag that made a small, apologetic rustle and pushed it across the counter. The manager's mouth pressed into a punctuation mark. The phones lifted higher. Someone whispered, "This is going viral," as if the word viral were a kind of blessing. We crossed to the security office, a cramped room with a metal table, a chair that complained when you sat on it, and a wall of screens where the store watched itself. The air smelled like coffee and a carpet that had heard too many stories. The guards stayed by the door. The manager took the chair with the best angle to the cameras. The man in the suit didn't sit, he crouched so his eyes were level with mine. "What's your name?" he asked. I gave it to him the way you give someone the last of your coins, slowly, afraid they'll hand it back. He repeated it, not to test the sound, but to promise he'd remember. Then he turned the photo in his hands again, as if the paper had pulse. "Where did your mother write these numbers?" he asked. "On the kitchen table," I said. It flashed in my head, a thin table with one leg that rocked, a cup full of pencils that were always getting lost, my mother's hand steady even when the world wasn't. She said the hospital bracelet wore out, so she wrote what mattered on the back. She said numbers don't forget. "Numbers don't forget," he repeated, softer. He took out his phone and, carefully, like the action itself was delicate, typed the sequence into a note. His hands were steady except for a tremor that looked like relief arguing with fear. The manager tapped her nails on the table. "Sir, identification?" He slid a wallet from his inner pocket and laid down a driver's license, a company card with a logo that looked expensive and simple at the same time, and something else, a narrow paper, folded twice, worn at the crease, like a document that had been traveled with rather than stored. He didn't push them toward her, he pushed them to the center, where anyone could see. The humility of the gesture surprised me more than the money in the logo. The manager barely glanced. "This isn't a family court," she said. "It's theft." The word sprang up before I could stop it. "She didn't steal," he said at the same time, tone not loud but firm enough to hold the room. "She asked. And when a child asks for bread, the word you reach for first shouldn't be police." The manager gave a small laugh like ice in a glass. "Philosophy won't pay for inventory." "It might pay for your sleep," he answered, not unkindly. Then, to the guard, "Could I use that phone?" "The store line, please." The taller guard glanced at the manager. She hesitated, then shrugged the way people do when they think they're still in control. The guard handed over a black desk phone. The man pressed a sequence with such certainty that I could tell he had pressed it 1,000 times without getting what he wanted. He waited. The waiting had years in it. "City General, Records," a voice crackled through. He put it on speaker, laid the phone on the table, and looked at me. "Say the numbers," he murmured. I recited them, each digit like a step across a narrow bridge. The voice on the other end repeated them back, brisk and official, the way rain repeats itself on windows. We waited again. The manager leaned back, confident that official voices live on her side of the fence. The screens on the wall showed the same scene from 3 different angles, and somehow we all looked smaller in each. "Records," the voice returned, slower now. "Bracelet code corresponds to a maternity admission 9 years ago." "Mother," the voice said my mother's name. It loosened something in my chest so suddenly I almost dropped. The man in the suit closed his eyes just once, as if blinking hurt. "Father listed on file?" he asked. "Authorized contact, yes." "There's a note, says, traveling for work. Will return." The voice paused. Paper rustled. "There's also an addendum filed later about custody, sealed." "Sorry." The manager's eyebrows rose, not in sympathy, in calculation. "So the father was absent," she said to the room. "And he returns when it's convenient." How touching. He didn't look at her. "Can you confirm if there was a second contact number added later?" he asked the phone. 2 years later, Records said. "But it's inactive now." "Any notation on a social service referral?" "A beat." "Yes." "Another beat." "Follow-up unsuccessful." Silence. Thick, like bread left too long in water. On the wall of screens, the cashier touched the Orphan loaf with one fingertip, the way you test if something is still warm. "Thank you," he said to the phone, and his thank you filled the little office with something that made the guards look at their shoes. He ended the call, then took a breath that sounded like someone opening a window in winter. The manager crossed her arms tighter. "None of that proves?" He unfolded the narrow paper he'd laid on the table. The fold lines were white scars. He smoothed it with his palm. "This is an affidavit from the hospital social worker," he said evenly, "stating I filed for a search and put up a contact bond. When the number went inactive, I kept the case open. If you'd like, I can call the social worker's supervisor." He wasn't boasting. He was laying down planks over a swamp. The manager's mouth tightened again, a habit more than a decision. "A lot of men claim things when there are cameras." He didn't glance at the cameras. He looked at me. "Do you still have the rabbit?" he asked, almost apologetically, as if he worried the question might embarrass me. I nodded. I pulled the small fabric rabbit from my pocket, one ear longer than the other, stitched by hands that knew how to mend more than cloth, and set it on the table between the documents and the bread. It looked smaller under the office light. The man's face softened in a way that had nothing to do with money or proof. My mother said he was brave when I wasn't, I said, and heard how childish it sounded and didn't care. She was right, he said. About him. About numbers. The manager exhaled sharply, a laugh with its kindness removed. So what now? You walk out with a child because you remember a rabbit? That's not how the world works. No, he said, standing slowly. The world works when grown-ups stop using it as an excuse. He turned to the guards. Gentlemen, will you accompany us to the front counter? I'll pay for the bread. He glanced at me. And for whatever else she needs today. Sir, the manager began. He faced her fully for the first time. His eyes weren't angry, they were exact. You have a policy against theft. You do not have a policy for humiliation. If you'd like to call the police, you can explain why your staff decided to film a hungry child instead of ringing up a small loaf and calling the number on a hospital record. For a moment, everything inside the tiny room paused, the whir of the fan, the flicker of the screens, the thin whistle of air through the door frame. The guards stepped aside. One of them, the taller, opened the door. We walked back through the aisle, past the cereal boxes that smiled too wide. Phones were still in the air, but some had lowered, shame nudging curiosity off its chair. The cashier's eyes were wet but not spilling. She scanned the bread, her hands gentle like she was checking a pulse. Anything else? She asked me quietly. I thought of what else meant when your pockets were both history and home. I looked at the man. He gave the smallest nod, a signal that meant you can ask without apologizing for existing. My voice still came out careful. Milk, I said. If that's okay. And fruit, he added. And a warm coat in her size, if you stock any. If not, we'll go next door. The scanner beeped like a small bird finding its note. Items slid across the counter and into a bag that stopped looking like a witness and started looking like help. Behind us, someone put their phone down. In the glass of the automatic doors, I saw our reflection, a small girl with a paper bag and a fabric rabbit, a man with a navy suit and a face that had begun to let the years catch up, and between them, the thin, stubborn thread of a number that hadn't forgotten. The paper bag crinkled in my arms like it had a heartbeat. Inside were things I hadn't dared to imagine: bread, milk, a pair of oranges that smelled faintly of sun. People parted in the aisles as we walked, some embarrassed, some pretending to read labels harder than ever before. The man in the navy suit didn't touch me, not yet, but his presence was like a tall lamp that finally reached a corner that had been dark too long. The automatic doors opened with their usual sigh. I thought freedom would taste like outside air, but instead it felt heavy, like walking into a silence that wasn't sure if it wanted to forgive us. The manager's red dress hovered in the glass reflection, refusing to disappear. Sir, she snapped, her bracelets flashing. I hope you realize half this town has footage now. Do you think they'll believe your little fairy tale? He didn't turn. His voice was steady, not raised, but it carried farther than her noise. The truth doesn't need to shout. It waits. We stepped into the parking lot. Evening leaned on the rooftops, the sky was pale gray with hints of lavender. I clutched the bag tighter, as if the world might change its mind and snatch it away. The man stopped by a bench near the doors. He crouched to my level again, and only then did he hold out his hand. "May I see the photograph once more?" he asked. I hesitated. The photo had lived in my pocket for years, pressed against me like a second heartbeat. But something in his tone, not command, not request, but promise, loosened my grip. I slid it from my coat and laid it across his palm. His fingers closed around it gently, like he was afraid of crumpling time itself. He studied the front again, then turned it over. The numbers scrawled on the back looked more fragile in the fading light, smudged but stubborn. He touched one with the tip of his thumb, as if confirming it was real. "Do you know what these are?" he asked me. "My mother said it was from the hospital," I whispered. "A bracelet. She wrote it down so we wouldn't forget." He nodded slowly. "Bracelet codes don't lie. They link to admissions, to births, to people. To family." The word family echoed like church bells I hadn't heard in years. A few shoppers lingered nearby, pretending to load groceries while aiming their phones at us. The manager crossed her arms just inside the glass doors, smirk sharp as glass. The man ignored them all. He pulled out his own phone again, thumb flying over the screen. A moment later, he looked at me. "Would you say the numbers out loud, carefully, one more time?" I did. My voice trembled, but I pressed each digit like stepping stones across a river. He repeated them softly, making sure he had them right. Then he pressed call. The phone rang once, twice. "City General Archives," a voice answered, crisp with routine. He spoke with the clarity of someone who had practiced hope until it was muscle. "This is Mr. A. I'm verifying bracelet record number," he recited it, firm. "9 years ago. Please confirm admission and contacts." "Hold a moment," the voice said. Paper shuffled faintly across the line. The man exhaled through his nose, steadying himself. I stared at the photo still in his other hand, watching it tremble slightly, not from me this time, but from him. Finally the voice returned. "Yes, record found. Maternity ward, January 9 years ago. Mother's name," she said, my mother's name. It cracked something inside me that had been hard too long. My throat burned. The man's eyes closed briefly. His lips moved around her name like a prayer. "Father listed?" he asked. "Authorized contact, yes. Male, 34 at the time, occupation listed as contractor abroad. Note, absent at delivery but declared intent to return." The words pressed into the night like stakes. The cameras caught them, the crowd caught them, but only I felt them land inside the hollow I'd carried for so long. The man opened his eyes again, and for the first time they looked wet. He didn't hide it. "Thank you," he said into the phone. "That will be enough." He hung up, pocketed the device, and stared at me with a softness that hurt. "Numbers don't forget," he murmured again. His hand lifted slightly, like he wanted to touch my shoulder but feared the world might shatter if he did too soon. The manager's voice cut through the air from the doorway. "So? Paperwork doesn't prove anything. A lot of men wear suits. A lot of kids cling to stories. Are you going to parade her around as some kind of prize?" Her words made the air cold again. People shifted, uneasy. The man finally rose to his full height, the photograph still in his hand. He turned toward the glass doors, his shadow stretching long across the pavement. "This isn't a prize," he said quietly. "It's a promise kept late. But kept." The crowd hushed. Even the phones seemed to hesitate. The manager faltered, her smirk slipping a fraction. I clutched the fabric rabbit in my pocket. My fingers found its worn ear, the stitches uneven but strong. I thought of my mother's voice, how she used to say, "One day, numbers and love will bring him back to you." And now here he was, standing taller than the store, carrying both. But inside me, a question still curled: would he stay? Or was this just another moment that would blur when the phone stopped recording? He seemed to sense it. His eyes softened further. "I've searched too many doors to lose the one that finally opened," he said, almost as if reading my thoughts. "I'm not leaving again." The paper bag in my arms grew lighter somehow. The oranges smelled brighter. And for the first time in years, the photograph didn't feel like proof. It felt like a bridge. The night air felt sharper outside, like every word spoken in the store had followed us and was now hanging between the lampposts. I held the paper bag tighter against my chest, afraid the wind would steal it the way people had tried to steal everything else. The man in the navy suit, the man from the photograph, walked beside me, not rushing, not forcing his steps to match mine, but adjusting naturally, as if he had done it 1,000 times before without me there. We didn't get far. A voice called from behind, heels striking the pavement like nails. "The manager." She wasn't done yet. Her bracelets clinked, her dress was still that angry red, and her eyes gleamed with the thrill of an audience. Phones glowed in the parking lot like restless fireflies, catching every second. "Sir," she barked. "This is unfinished business. You think one call to a hospital clears everything? Papers can be forged. Stories can be invented." She snapped her fingers toward the guards. "Escort them back. The police can sort this out." The guards hesitated. The taller one scratched his jaw, eyes shifting between her and the man at my side. Cameras in the crowd zoomed closer, hungry for a fight. The man didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You're right," he said simply, his eyes steady on the manager. "Stories can be invented. But not this one. Numbers don't forget, and neither do faces." He crouched again, bringing his height down to mine. The crowd hushed without knowing why. He held up the photo, turning it so the fading light caught both his image on paper and his real features side by side. The resemblance was undeniable, the same line of the jaw, the same tired kindness in the eyes. Gasps rippled like wind across dry leaves. "Look closely," he told the crowd, though his gaze stayed locked on mine. "Do you see the difference?" No one answered. They didn't have to. In that moment, the paper proof became flesh. I swallowed, my throat tight. "It's you," I whispered, and the words tasted strange, like hope with edges. His hand trembled slightly as he reached into his coat again. He pulled out a folded envelope, the edges worn, the ink faded. "I've carried this every day for 9 years," he said. He opened it carefully, revealing a photograph much like mine, except younger, my mother, her tired smile, her arm resting protectively over a hospital bed. And in the corner, a baby wrapped in thin white cloth. The crowd leaned closer, their phones catching every detail. The manager's expression faltered. "This is my daughter," he said, voice quiet but breaking. "This is proof enough." The taller guard cleared his throat. "Sir, if that's true, then she belongs with you. Not with police reports." His partner nodded reluctantly. The manager flushed, her arms crossing tighter. "Anyone can claim a child," she hissed. "Do you even know her favorite toy? Her scars? Her habits?" My breath caught. I wanted to hide the rabbit deeper in my pocket, but his eyes flicked there first, soft with memory. "The rabbit," he said gently. "One ear longer than the other. Stitched by her mother. She used to tell me she wanted it to listen better than people did. I pulled it out slowly, holding it in both hands like a flag of surrender. The stitches glistened faintly under the parking lot lights. A murmur swelled through the crowd, pity, awe, disbelief mixing in one tide. The manager stepped back, her certainty cracking. Even if, she stammered, even if you are who you say, you abandoned them once. Who says you won't again? That cut deeper than the cold. My stomach twisted. I stared at him, waiting, fearing. His eyes found mine instantly. I didn't leave by choice, he said, each word carved slow. I was sent away by work, then blocked by lies, then lost by broken systems. But I never stopped searching. Never. His voice dipped lower, almost raw. I have files, payments, unanswered letters. But none of that matters now. What matters is this. He placed his palm gently over mine, over the rabbit. I found you. And I will not lose you again. Silence pressed on the crowd. Even the phones stopped moving for a breath. Then, from somewhere near the back, a child whispered, "She looks like him." It broke the dam. Murmurs spread, sympathy swelling louder than suspicion. The man straightened, taller than the doubt around us. He turned to the guards. "We'll leave now." It wasn't a question. The taller guard nodded firmly, stepping aside. The manager opened her mouth to protest, but no words came out. For once, her red dress looked less like authority and more like warning. As we walked toward the far side of the lot, people lowered their phones, some embarrassed, some quietly wiping their eyes. The automatic doors behind us slid closed with one last sigh, as if even the store itself was tired of her voice. We reached his car, sleek, black, shining under the lot lamps. Too clean, too sharp against the worn soles of my shoes. He opened the back door, set the grocery bag gently inside, then turned back to me. "Do you trust me enough to ride with me?" he asked softly. Trust. A word heavier than bread, heavier than numbers, heavier than any photograph. I clutched the rabbit, its long ear brushing my cheek. My heart raced like it wanted to jump out and run ahead. But I looked into his eyes, the same eyes from the photograph, only older, lined with years that hadn't broken them. I nodded. Relief rippled through his shoulders. He exhaled as if he'd been holding his breath since the day I was born. Carefully, he opened the front passenger door for me. I climbed in, the seat smelling of leather and faint cologne. He closed the door, walked around, and slid into the driver's seat. For a moment we just sat there, the night folding around us like a cloak. Then he said, almost to himself but loud enough for me to hear, "Home." Finally. And for the first time in forever, the word home didn't sound like a story. It sounded like a beginning. We didn't drive far. He took side streets that looked like memories, quiet, ordinary, the kind that don't announce themselves but keep you anyway. The car murmured more than it moved. I pressed the rabbit to the window and watched lights smear into soft ribbons. His hands were steady on the wheel, but every few seconds he glanced at me, then back to the road, then at me again, as if confirming I was not a trick of glass. We stopped at a small place with fogged windows and a sign that had lost a letter. The kind of diner that smells like coffee and kindness. Inside, the booths were patched but clean. A waitress with a cardigan 2 sizes too big brought us a pot of something warm before we'd even asked. He ordered soup for me and nothing for himself. "You're not hungry?" I asked. "I've been hungry for 9 years," he said softly. "This kind is easier." The soup was simple and perfect. Steam lifted into my face like a small blessing. He didn't speak at first, not because he didn't have words, but because he was letting silence be soft rather than sharp. When he finally did, his voice had the careful shape of someone building a bridge while already walking on it. "I promised your mother I'd come back," he said. "Work took me far, and then the world got complicated. Calls that didn't connect. Papers that vanished. Addresses that changed the day I arrived. I kept proof, kept pushing, but it was like shouting through snow." He searched my face, not to convince me, to be honest with me. "I failed you by being late. I won't fail you by leaving." I didn't know how to hold so many feelings in such a small body, so I didn't. I let them stand around the booth like extra people, fear, hope, a little anger that didn't know where to point, and a relief so big it looked like the night sky. He pulled out the photograph again, smoothed the edges. "Numbers don't forget," he said, almost smiling. "But people can choose to remember." The waitress set down a slice of pie I hadn't ordered. "On the house," she said, eyes kind and bright with that wetness adults pretend isn't there. "For both of you." Then she leaned closer and whispered, "Just for me, they filmed you at that store. Let them film this too, the part where a child gets treated like a child." When we left the diner, the air felt less like metal and more like breath. He didn't steer the car toward some grand place, he turned us around and drove back to the strip where the market sat. I tensed, fingers tightening on the rabbit's long ear. "We don't have to go back," I said quickly, the words tripping over each other. "We don't," he agreed. "But sometimes the world needs to learn the difference between witness and spectator. And sometimes repair has to happen where the harm did." The parking lot still held pockets of people, the afterglow of gossip. The automatic doors sighed open. Inside, the cashier lifted her head, startled, then relieved. The manager stood like a lighthouse designed to warn ships away rather than guide them in. Her red dress looked brighter under fluorescent lights, but not stronger. He walked to the counter, not slow, not fast, exact. "We came to pay," he said, placing the paper bag down with a gentleness that made the whole room feel clumsy. "For the bread. For everything that wasn't rung up when humiliation was." The manager's mouth found its old shape. "We already." He set his card on the counter. "And we came to leave something else behind." He turned, addressing not just her, not just the phones still hovering like nervous birds, but the space itself. "A child shouldn't be a spectacle. If you see hunger, ring up bread. If you see proof, don't call it a trick. And if you make a mistake," he looked back to the manager, "not cruel, just true, apologize in the same room where you did the harm." For a heartbeat, all you could hear was the hum of refrigerators and the small, precise beep of the scanner as the cashier, cheeks flushed, jaw set, began to ring items through, bread again, milk again, fruit, a warm coat in my size that someone had run next door to get. Then the sound that followed wasn't a beep. It was a word. "I'm sorry," the manager said. It wasn't perfect. It didn't fix the past. But it didn't run from the present either. Her shoulders dropped. Her bracelets didn't clink. "We should have led with care," she added, as if the syllables had been waiting in her throat for years. "We didn't. I didn't." The cashier slid the bag back toward us, heavier than before in all the right ways. "If you come by again," she said to me, "I'll keep a loaf off to the side. Just in case the world forgets how to be kind for a day." We stepped outside into a night that no longer felt like it needed to prove anything. The sky was nothing fancy, a plain dark stitched with simple stars, but it looked like it could hold weight. He popped the trunk, tucked the bag in carefully, then handed me the coat. Warmth climbed my sleeves like a small, sturdy animal. "Where is home?" I asked, the question dragging a shadow behind it. He didn't lie. A place with too many empty rooms that were waiting without admitting it. He breathed out, fog blooming in the cold. "If you want it." Want. The word sat in my chest like a yes that hadn't been told it was allowed yet. I thought of the rabbit, the numbers, the door that opened when he said, "Excuse me," and the room that went quiet because truth doesn't shout. I thought of my mother, writing carefully on the back of a photograph so the future wouldn't have to guess. Numbers don't forget. Maybe love doesn't either. Maybe it just takes the long way home. "I want it," I said. He didn't cheer. He didn't collapse. He closed his eyes for a second and let a single tear travel honestly down, not hidden, not dramatic. Then he unlocked the passenger door. We drove past the diner again. The waitress stood at the window, pretending to wipe a spot that didn't exist. She lifted a hand. I lifted mine back. At a red light, a boy who had filmed everything lowered his phone and gave me a thumbs up, embarrassed by his own kindness. The light turned green. Home had a porch light that flickered before it decided to be brave. Inside, the room smelled like lemon and memory. There were pictures on the mantel that didn't include me yet, and space between them that did. He hung my coat on a hook that had once belonged to no one and now belonged to me. The rabbit sat on a shelf like it had always lived there. "Tomorrow," he said, as if he were writing the day on the air with his voice, "we call the social worker. We gather papers that say what our hearts already know. We learn favorite breakfasts. We set more places at the table. We take walks that go nowhere because the point isn't where you end up, it's who you turn to when the wind changes." He paused, searching my face. "And tonight," he added, gentler, "we eat warm bread." We did. On the counter, under a kitchen light that made crumbs look golden, we broke the loaf that had been evidence and let it be bread again. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Sometimes healing is a quiet thing that happens while you chew. Before sleep, he brought a frame from a box and slid the photograph inside, not to trap it, but to let it rest. He put it on the mantel, just left of center. Not the beginning. Not the end. A bridge that remembered it was built to be crossed. "Good night," he said at my doorway, which had felt like a doorway for only a few minutes and already felt like one for a lifetime. "Numbers don't forget," he added softly, the old refrain turned into a lullaby. "And I will not, either." The house clicked and sighed, the way houses do when they're adjusting to a new story. The rabbit's long ear leaned toward me like it was listening, the way my mother wanted. And for the first time since I could remember, sleep didn't feel like falling. It felt like being held. If this story touched you, if you believe no child should have to beg for dignity or proof, help us keep telling stories that matter. Like this video, subscribe to Christbuyer, and share in the comments what moment hit you hardest. The world listens when many small voices speak together.